Trevon was 34 years old, made $48,000 a year teaching business fundamentals to community college students, and was currently seated in the fourth row of a $5,000 a plate gala, watching his wife on stage prepare to publicly detonate their 8-year marriage. The ballroom at the St. Regis in Buckhead was a galaxy of ice sculptures and shimmering gowns. A place so far removed from their cramped apartment on the west side that it felt like another planet. He wore his only suit, a 10-year-old Joss, a bank number that cost him $300 and now felt 2 sizes too tight in the shoulders. He felt like an imposter, a footnote in the story of her glorious ascent. Aaliyah, his wife, looked like she was born for this. She was luminous under the spotlights, her deep brown skin glowing. Her hair was styled in an intricate crown of twists that must have cost $1,000, and the dress, a flowing emerald green silk gown from a designer he'd never heard of, was probably worth more than his 2012 Honda Accord. In her hand, she held a delicate flute of champagne, the bubbles catching the light. On the massive screen behind her, the logo for her tech company, Innovire, was projected above a single, staggering number, $40 million. "I have so many people to thank for this moment," she began, her voice smooth and confident, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. "Our incredible lead investors at Apex Ventures, our brilliant team, our early believers." Trevon felt a small, hollow ache in his chest. He remembered being an early believer. He remembered the nights he'd stay up with her until 3 a.m., brewing pot after pot of cheap coffee, using his adjunct professor's mind to help her refine the very pitch decks that had secured this funding. He remembered selling his grandfather's collection of first edition books, worth about $4,000, to pay for her initial server costs. He was a believer. He just wasn't the kind that got mentioned on stage. She continued, her smile widening. "This journey has been about more than just building a company. It's been about building a new life. It's about shedding the things that hold you back, the people who don't share your vision, the weights that keep you from flying." A nervous murmur went through the crowd. This was not the standard sanitized speech of a newly funded CEO. This felt personal, raw. Trevon's hands, resting on his knees, began to feel cold and heavy. He knew where this was going. He'd felt it coming for months in the clipped phone calls, the late nights she didn't come home, the way she looked at his worn-out Timex watch with unconcealed pity. "To get to the next level," Aaliyah declared, raising her glass high, the $150 a bottle champagne sparkling, "you have to be willing to cut ties. You have to be willing to be ruthless. You have to be free." Her eyes scanned the room, and for a terrifying second, they locked with his. There was no recognition in them, no love, only a cold, triumphant fire. Then she delivered the final blow, a toast that echoed in the sudden shocked silence of the 200-person ballroom. "So, I want to make one final toast," she said, her voice ringing with a terrible clarity. "To the future, to Innovire, and to finally being free of him at last." The words hung in the air, brutal and undeniable. A few people clapped uncertainly, while others shifted in their $500 chairs, whispering to their neighbors. For Trevon, the world narrowed to a single point of sound, the ringing in his ears. He was him, the weight she had shed, the tie she had cut. And she had done it here, in a room full of strangers, turning his private heartbreak into her public victory speech. He had no idea how terribly she had just miscalculated. Just 2 years ago, their life had been a universe, away from the cold glamour of the St. Regis ballroom. It was contained within the 4 walls of a 900-square-foot apartment off Marietta Street, a space filled with mismatched furniture and the warm smell of the dinners Trevon cooked every night. Their budget was tight, a constant negotiation between her ambition and their reality. His $48,000 salary was the bedrock, the steady, unglamorous income that paid the $1,400 monthly rent, kept the lights on, and covered the groceries from the local Kroger. Aaliyah's startup, Innovire, was just an idea then, a frantic collection of notes on a second-hand whiteboard that Trevin had found on the curb and fixed for her. She had no income, only a burning, all-consuming drive. He was her biggest supporter, not just emotionally, but financially. His paycheck was their lifeline. He remembered one specific Tuesday evening, about 18 months before the gala. It was raining, a soft, steady rhythm against their old window panes. He was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of turkey chili he'd made from a $25 batch of groceries, meant to last them the week. The air was warm and smelled of cumin and garlic. He wore a faded Morehouse College sweatshirt, a relic from his undergraduate days. Aaliyah was at their small dining table, which was covered in papers, her laptop glowing. She hadn't eaten. She was hunched over, her shoulders tense, her face a mask of frustration. She'd just been rejected by another angel investor. "It's the pitch deck," she muttered, not looking up. "It's not sharp enough. They said the market analysis is weak." Trevin turned the stove down to a simmer and came to stand behind her, resting his hands on her shoulders. He could feel the knots of stress beneath his fingers. He started to gently massage them. "Let me see," he said softly. For the next 3 hours, he sat with her. He, the humble community college adjunct, applied the core principles he taught his students every day. He helped her restructure the narrative, strengthen the data visualizations, and clarify the unique value proposition. He used concepts from Porter's 5 Forces and SWOT analysis, things she'd dismissed as boring academic stuff. But under his patient guidance, the pitch deck transformed from a desperate plea into a confident, compelling argument. He didn't ask for credit. He didn't ask for anything. Seeing the hope return to her eyes was enough. It's so much better," she'd said, looking up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Trevon, you're brilliant." She'd kissed him then, a deep, grateful kiss that made him feel like the most important man in the world. That night, they ate the chili straight from the pot, sitting on the floor, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't check her phone once. She talked about their future, a future where they would have a house with a small garden for him and a real office for her, a future they were building together. He paid for her to attend a $1,500 tech conference in Austin, putting the expense on his credit card and telling her they could pay it off over a few months. It was at that conference that she met the people who would eventually introduce her to Apex Ventures. He bought her a new laptop, a $1,800 MacBook Pro, when her old one died, because he knew how much she needed it. He told her it was a bonus from the college, a lie to protect her pride. The bonus was actually money he'd pulled from his own modest retirement account, a $2,000 withdrawal that came with a tax penalty. The apartment was filled with these small, invisible sacrifices. The new pair of running shoes he didn't buy for himself so she could have a new $150 blazer for a networking event. The weekend trips he gave up to stay home while she worked. He saw it all as an investment in her, in them. He believed they were a team. He was the foundation, the steady ground upon which she could build her empire. He had no idea she was planning to demolish the foundation as soon as the building was complete. What have you sacrificed for someone you love? It's a question we all face, but sometimes the answer is far more than we ever intended to give. The shift was gradual at first, a slow erosion of kindness that Trevon tried to ignore. It began with small comments, little barbs disguised as jokes. About 6 months before the gala, Aaliyah secured her first round of seed funding, a respectable $500,000. It was enough for her to rent a small co-working space and hire her first 2 employees. and it was enough to start seeing his life's work as a source of embarrassment. They were having dinner at a new restaurant in Inman Park. One of her investor friends had recommended it. The entrees were $50 each, a price that made Trevon's stomach clench. Aaliyah ordered a $90 bottle of wine without even glancing at the price. "I was talking to Michael from the firm today," she said, swirling the deep red liquid in her glass. "His wife is a partner at King and Spalding. She just closed a huge merger." "That's great," Trevon said, trying to sound enthusiastic. He was calculating how many hours he'd have to work to pay for this single meal. Aaliyah took a delicate sip of wine. "It is. It just makes you think, you know? About power couples. People who build empires together." She looked at him, her eyes cool and assessing. He asked what you did. I wasn't sure what to say. The words stung. "You can say I'm a professor. I teach business." She gave a little laugh, a brittle sound with no warmth in it. "Trevon, honey, you're an adjunct at a community college. It's not the same thing. It's sweet. It's like a hobby." A hobby. The word landed like a slap. His job, the work he poured his heart into, the students he mentored, the lives he was helping to shape, a hobby. He remembered one of his students, a single mother named Keisha, who had used the business plan she developed in his class to get a small business loan and open her own bakery. He'd gone to the grand opening. The look of pride on her face was worth more than any stock option, but he knew explaining that to Aaliyah would be pointless. She was speaking a different language now, a language of capital and scale, and he was no longer fluent. The cruelty escalated from there. She started taking calls in the other room, whispering about him. One evening, he was walking past the bedroom door and heard her on the phone with, he assumed, one of her new friends. I know, she was saying, her voice dripping with exasperation. "He's just comfortable. He has no ambition. Can you imagine? $48,000 a year and he's happy with it. It's holding me back. I'm trying to build a billion-dollar company and he's grading papers on a Saturday night. He's a paycheck, not a partner. A starter husband." He froze, his hand on the doorknob. A starter husband. The clinical, disposable nature of the phrase hollowed him out. He felt like a piece of outdated software she was planning to uninstall. He backed away from the door, his heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm. He went into the living room and sat on their worn-out $400 IKEA sofa, the one they'd built together on their first weekend in the apartment, and felt utterly, completely alone. The final, most brutal accumulation of outrage came a month before the gala. She had moved out, claiming she needed a place closer to her new office in Buckhead to focus. She'd rented a sleek, minimalist condo in a glass tower for $4,000 a month, an amount that was almost his entire take-home pay. He knew it was the beginning of the end, but he still held on to a sliver of hope. He called her one night just to hear her voice. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. "Just checking in. How's the new place?" "Busy," she said, her voice distant, distracted. He could hear the clinking of glasses and loud music in the background. She was clearly at a party or a networking event. "Listen, Trevon, I can't really talk." "Okay, I miss you," he said, the words feeling small and pathetic. There was a long pause. He heard her say to someone next to her, "Ugh, it's him again." Then, back into the phone, her voice was like ice. "Trevon, we need to be realistic. My life is going in a very different direction. This whole thing," she said. And he knew she meant their marriage, their shared history, their life. "It's just not a good look for me anymore." Not a good look. He was a branding problem. He was an obstacle to her image. He, who had funded her dream, proofread her plans, and massaged the stress from her shoulders, was now an inconvenience. He hung up the phone, the dial tone buzzing in his ear. The hope he'd been clinging to finally died. He sat in the quiet of their once shared apartment and understood. It wasn't just that she didn't love him anymore. It was that she was ashamed of him. The outrage didn't scream. It settled deep in his bones, cold and hard and heavy. He had no idea that this profound sense of betrayal was about to intersect with a responsibility he had been quietly carrying for years. The ringing in Trevon's ears from Aaliyah's toast slowly subsided, replaced by a strange, preternatural calm. As the confused applause died down, a memory surfaced, sharp and clear. It was from 3 months ago, a quarterly review meeting for the Lumina Foundation. The Lumina Foundation was his grandfather's legacy, a self-made man who had built a construction empire from nothing. His grandfather had spent his last years creating a charitable foundation with a singular ironclad mission to anonymously fund and empower the next generation of Black entrepreneurs in the South. When he passed away, he had left Trevon, his only grandchild, as the sole trustee. It was a staggering responsibility, overseeing a portfolio worth over $100 million. Trevon took it with the utmost seriousness, honoring his grandfather's mandate of quiet, impactful support. He never spoke of it, not to his colleagues, not to his friends, and certainly not to Aaliyah. His grandfather believed that true charity didn't need a spotlight. The meeting had been with the foundation's investment managers at their quiet, understated offices on Peachtree Street. They were discussing a new Series A investment, the largest the foundation had ever anchored. "It's a $10 million commitment, Trevon," said Mr. Harris, the elderly, sharp-as-a-tack lawyer who had been his grandfather's closest confidant. "It's the anchor investment in a $40 million round. The company is called Innovire, tech sector, Atlanta-based female founder." Trevon had nodded, reviewing the prospectus. The foundation's name, as always, was shielded behind a special purpose vehicle, a neutrally named entity called Southlight Capital Partners. The founder's name was listed as A. Johnson. It never even occurred to him. Aaliyah's maiden name was Johnson, but it was one of the most common names in America. And Innovire? It sounded like 1,000 other tech startups. He trusted Mr. Harris and the managers to do their due diligence on the business fundamentals. His role as trustee was to ensure any investment aligned with his grandfather's mission. "It fits the charter perfectly," Mr. Harris had continued. "High growth potential, Black-founded, creating jobs in our community. Your grandfather would have loved this one." Trevon had signed the papers. He authorized the $10 million wire transfer from the foundation's accounts. He had felt a quiet sense of pride, fulfilling his grandfather's vision. Now, sitting in the St. Regis ballroom, the pieces slammed together with the force of a physical impact. Innovire, A. Johnson, the $40 million round. The lead VC she had thanked, Apex Ventures, was the very firm the foundation had partnered with to structure the deal. He had funded her. The money she was using to build her new life, the money that had given her the platform to publicly humiliate him, was his grandfather's money. It was money he had authorized. The irony was so staggering, so profoundly bitter, it almost made him laugh. Her toast wasn't just a declaration of freedom from him, the broke adjunct professor. It was a declaration of freedom from the very source that had enabled her flight. She was a bird taking wing, not realizing the branch she'd just launched from was the only thing holding her nest. He looked at her on stage, basking in the applause, her face radiant with success. She had no idea. The dramatic irony was a shield around his heart. The pain of her words was still there, but it was now overlaid with something else, a cold, clear understanding of the power he held. He wasn't just the man she was leaving behind, he was the man who held the master key to the kingdom she had just built. The world went silent as he focused on a single, crystalline thought. This was not over. Trevin didn't go to the after party. He didn't confront Aaliyah. He simply stood up from his fourth-row seat, straightened his old suit jacket, and walked out of the St. Regis ballroom. The valet, a young man who looked like one of his students, brought his 2012 Honda Accord around. The modest car felt like a sanctuary amidst the gleaming parade of Teslas and BMWs. He didn't drive back to the apartment that was no longer theirs. Instead, he drove to a nondescript Marriott courtyard off I-75 and paid $149 for a room with cash. The room was sterile, anonymous. It was perfect. The rain began to fall outside, streaking the windows. A quiet companion to the storm inside him. He took off his jacket, loosened his tie, and sat down at the small desk. He didn't turn on the television. He didn't order room service. He opened his worn leather briefcase, a gift from his grandfather years ago, and pulled out a thick, leather-bound document, the Lumina Foundation Charter. His hands were steady as he turned the pages. He knew the charter almost by heart, but he needed to see the words, to touch the paper. He found the section he was looking for, Article 4, Section B, Trustees' Fiduciary and Moral Discretion. His grandfather, a man who trusted contracts but trusted character more, had written it himself with Mr. Harris's help. It stated in clear, unambiguous language that the sole trustee had the power to withdraw any investment at any time if the trustee determined that the recipient of the funds was acting in a manner incongruous with the moral and ethical spirit of the foundation's mission. The mission, as defined in the preamble, was to support entrepreneurs who demonstrated integrity, community-mindedness, and personal character. Aaliyah's public, cruel dismissal of her husband, the man who had supported her from the beginning, was a textbook violation of that spirit. It was a betrayal not just of him, but of the very values the money was meant to uphold. He then flipped to the investment agreement he had signed 3 months prior. He found the clause he and Mr. Harris had discussed at length. It was a standard but powerful provision in venture capital, designed to protect the anchor investor. The pari passu dissolution clause. It stipulated that if the anchor investor, Southlight Capital Partners, the foundation's vehicle, withdrew its funds pre-closing for any reason, all other investors in the round had the right to do the same. In fact, it triggered a full unwinding of the financing structure. The entire $40 million round was built on the foundation's $10 million. If that cornerstone was removed, the entire arch would collapse. At 11:47 p.m., he picked up his phone and called Mr. Harris at his home. He apologized for the late hour. "Trevon, what's wrong, son?" The old lawyer's voice was thick with sleep, but instantly sharp with concern. Trevon explained everything, his voice calm and even, betraying none of the turmoil inside him. He told him about the gala, the toast, the connection between Innovire and Aaliyah Johnson. He read the trustee's discretionary clause aloud. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Mr. Harris finally spoke, his voice was cold steel. "Your grandfather put that clause in for a reason," he said. "Invest in good people, not just good ideas." He knew character was the only collateral that truly matters. "What do you want to do, Trevon?" "I want to invoke Article 4, Section B," Trevon said, his voice quiet but firm. "I want to withdraw the foundation's investment, effective immediately." "It will detonate the entire Series A round," Mr. Harris warned. "She will lose everything." "She made her choice," Trevin replied. "Now I'm making mine." "I'll draft the official notice of withdrawal first thing in the morning," Mr. Harris said. "We'll date it for today. You'll have it by noon on Saturday. You should deliver it to her in person." Trevon agreed. He spent the rest of the night compiling evidence. He saved news articles about the gala. He found the video of her speech already posted on a tech blog. He wrote down every cruel thing she had said, every sacrifice he had made, not for a court of law, but for himself. To remind him that this wasn't revenge. It was a course correction. It was an act of stewardship. He was protecting his grandfather's legacy from someone who had proven herself unworthy of it. The hours after the gala were a strange, surreal limbo. Trevon stayed in the Marriott, a ghost in his own life, while the world celebrated Aaliyah. His phone buzzed intermittently with texts from friends and family who had seen clips of the speech online, their messages a mixture of confusion and concern. He answered none of them. At 10:15 a.m. on Saturday, Aaliyah called him. He was sitting by the window watching the rain-slicked traffic, the legal notice from Mr. Harris already printed and resting in a crisp manila envelope on the desk. He let it ring 3 times before answering, schooling his voice to be neutral, calm. "Hello? Trevon, where are you?" Her voice was bright, bubbly, laced with the lingering euphoria of her triumph. There was no apology, no remorse. "I tried the apartment. You missed an amazing after-party. Everyone was there. Mark Cuban even sent a video message. Can you believe it?" He could believe it. "I had to leave early," he said simply. "I wasn't feeling well." "Oh, well, you missed out," she said, the lack of concern in her voice a fresh, small wound. "Listen, things are going to be crazy for a while. I'm flying to New York on Monday to ring the opening bell at the NASDAQ. The PR team is setting it all up. It's insane." She paused, and for a moment, he thought she might say something meaningful. He was wrong. "My assistant is going to call you next week to arrange for getting the rest of my things from the apartment. I'll need the good suitcases, the gray Samsonite set." The $600 set he had bought her for their 5th anniversary. This was his chance. The perfect moment to feign ignorance, to let her build her tower of cards a little higher before he pulled the one at the bottom. The dramatic irony was a shield. He knew her world was hours away from imploding, and she was busy worrying about luggage. "Okay," he said, "just let me know when." "Great," she said, relieved to have the awkward administrative task handled. "And Trevon," she added, her tone shifting to one of magnanimous condescension, "I know last night was direct, but it was for the best. You'll see. And don't worry, I'll be sure to have my lawyers draft a generous divorce settlement. I'll take care of you. You won't have to worry about money." The rage that had solidified into a cold resolve now flickered with heat. Take care of him? With the money he had unknowingly provided? The audacity was breathtaking. He had to clench his jaw to keep his voice steady. The temptation to tell her everything right then, to hear her voice crumble over the phone, was immense. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was precise. It required discipline. "That's generous of you, Aaliyah," he managed to say. "Thank you." "You're welcome," she said, pleased with her own benevolence. "I've got to run. Board calls all day. Talk later." She hung up. Trevon slowly lowered the phone. He looked at the manila envelope on the desk. He had thought delivering it would be the hardest part, but now he knew it wouldn't be. Her condescension, her casual cruelty, her complete lack of awareness. It was all the fuel he needed. He was not destroying her life out of spite. He was simply holding up a mirror and letting her see the consequences of her own actions. The composed, quiet finality of his plan felt less like a choice, and more like a law of physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Her toast was the action. He and the Lumina Foundation were about to be the reaction. Have you ever had to pretend everything is fine when your world is falling apart? That's the moment you discover a strength you never knew you had. A quiet power that waits for the perfect moment to reveal itself. The after-party was at a penthouse lounge in a Buckhead glass tower, a space that seemed to float among the clouds and the glittering lights of the Atlanta skyline. The air hummed with the energy of money and power. Men in $5,000 custom suits and women in designer dresses that cost more than Trevon's monthly salary mingled, their laughter echoing off the floor-to-ceiling windows. Trevon arrived at 10:30 p.m. He had traded his old suit for a simple, impeccably tailored black suit he'd bought that afternoon for $800, a quiet statement of purpose. His locks were freshly twisted, his shoes shined. He no longer looked like an out-of-place adjunct professor. He looked like he belonged. He looked like a trustee. He saw Aaliyah across the crowded room. She was the center of it all, a radiant sun with a dozen venture capitalists and tech journalists orbiting her. She was holding a glass of champagne, laughing at something one of them had said. She looked happy, untouchable, completely oblivious to the fact that her universe was about to contract into a black hole. Trevon didn't approach her immediately. He moved through the party with a calm, deliberate pace, a silent predator in a jungle of his own making. He got a glass of water from the bar. He listened to the conversations around him. Conversations about term sheets and burn rates and exit strategies. It was the world he taught his students about, but seeing it up close, in all its arrogant glory, solidified his resolve. He waited for the perfect moment. It came when Aaliyah was standing with Michael, the lead partner from Apex Ventures, the man she had thanked so profusely on stage. It was poetic. Michael needed to be there to witness this. Trevon walked towards them. Aaliyah saw him coming, and her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. "Trevon," she said, her voice tight, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I had some business to attend to," he replied, his voice even and low. He looked past her, directly at Michael. "Michael, a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Michael, a portly man with a florid face, looked confused. "Have we met?" "Not officially," Trevon said. "I'm Trevon Williams. I'm the sole trustee of the Lumina Foundation." The name of the foundation meant nothing to Aaliyah, but Michael's face instantly paled. He knew. The Lumina Foundation was the true name behind Southlight Capital Partners, their silent, powerful anchor. Aaliyah just looked irritated. "Trevon, what are you talking about? This is my night. If you're here to make a scene—" "I'm not here to make a scene," Trevon interrupted her, his voice dropping to an almost whisper, forcing them to lean in. "I'm here to deliver a message." He reached into the inner pocket of his new suit jacket and pulled out the single, crisp manila envelope. He didn't hand it to Aaliyah. He handed it directly to Michael. "What is this?" Michael asked, his hand trembling slightly as he took it. "That," Trevon said, his eyes finally locking with Aaliyah's, "is a formal notice of withdrawal. Per Article 4, Section B of the Foundation's charter, I have exercised my discretionary right as trustee. The Lumina Foundation finds that the leadership of Innovire has acted in a manner incongruous with the ethical spirit of our mission." He then delivered the callback, using her own words as the blade. "My grandfather believed in funding partners, not just paychecks. He believed a company's character was its most valuable asset. It seems Innovire is not a good look for us anymore." Aaliyah's face went through a rapid, devastating series of transformations. First, confusion. The words made no sense. The Lumina Foundation? Trustee? What did any of that have to do with him? Then, as she saw the sheer terror dawning in Michael's eyes, a sliver of understanding began to pierce her triumphant haze. Michael fumbled with the envelope, his portly fingers struggling to open it. He scanned the single page, his face turning from pale to a ghastly shade of gray. "The pari passu clause," he whispered, looking at Aaliyah with horror. "The whole round. It's tied to their $10 million. If they pull out—" And then Aaliyah understood. The blood drained from her face. Her perfect smile dissolved. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the polished marble floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden pocket of silence around them. "You?" she breathed, the word a ragged puff of air. "The money? It was you?" Trevon gave a single, slight nod. He didn't need to say anything else. He had delivered the notice. He had made his statement. His work was done. He turned his back on her shocked face, on Michael's panicked sputtering, on the spreading puddle of expensive champagne. He walked calmly out of the penthouse lounge, leaving the beautiful, glittering party and the woman who had built her success on his back to face the consequences he had just set in motion. The quiet finality of the act was absolute. The consequences cascaded with brutal corporate efficiency. Trevon had set the first domino in motion, and the entire intricate structure of the $40 million deal collapsed over the course of a single weekend. Saturday, 9:15 a.m. The first official email landed in Aaliyah's inbox. It was from Michael at Apex Ventures, CCing their legal team and the other primary investors. The subject line was stark: urgent, Innovire series of financing. The body of the email was cold and direct. Pursuant to the withdrawal of the anchor investor, Southlight Capital Partners, the Lumina Foundation, Apex Ventures is hereby exercising its rights under Section 7.4 of the financing agreement to withdraw its commitment. All funds will be clawed back. We are calling an emergency board meeting for Tuesday at 10 a.m. to discuss the dissolution of the round. Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Aaliyah's frantic texts began. Trevon was at a small community garden near his college, his hands in the soil, planting tomato seedlings. He watched the messages come in, his phone buzzing on the bench beside him, but did not reply. 2:30 p.m. Trevon, call me. Now. This is a mistake. 2:35 p.m. You can't do this. This is my life's work. You are destroying my company. 2:41 p.m. Was this about the toast? I was emotional. I didn't mean it. You know I didn't mean it. 3:15 p.m. I'm calling Mr. Harris. I'm calling a lawyer. This is illegal. You can't just take the money back. 4 p.m. Please, Trevon. I'm sorry, okay? I am so sorry. Just call me. We can fix this, please. 5:30 p.m. You are a cruel, bitter man. You couldn't stand to see me succeed. You did this to ruin me. Sunday, 11 a.m. While Aaliyah was leaving desperate, tearful voicemails, the other venture capital firms were already moving to protect their capital. A chain of emails, which Mr. Harris later forwarded to Trevon, showed the swift, merciless verdict of the market. With the anchor LP out, the risk profile is completely altered. We're out. The pari passu clause is clear. We are invoking. Consider our commitment withdrawn. By noon on Sunday, every single dollar of the $40 million round had vanished. Monday, 8 a.m. Aaliyah's co-founder, a brilliant coder she had lured away from Google with the promise of a massive equity stake, they confronted her at their newly leased $30,000 a month office space. The news had spread like wildfire through the tech community. He had a wife and a mortgage. The stock options he'd been promised were now worthless pieces of paper. He resigned on the spot, taking 2 key engineers with him. Tuesday, 10 a.m. The emergency board meeting was a bloodbath conducted over Zoom. Aaliyah, her face pale and drawn, tried to plead her case, but the investors were stone-faced. The legal language was absolute. The round was dead. Innovire, which had a burn rate of nearly $200,000 a month, was now insolvent. Worse, they had already spent nearly $2 million of the initial wire transfers on signing bonuses, equipment leases, and that lavish gala. That money was now a debt owed to the VCs. Aaliyah was personally liable for a portion of it. The board voted unanimously to remove her as CEO. They would attempt to sell the company's intellectual property for pennies on the dollar to recoup some of the losses. Her shares, once valued on paper at over $15 million, were now worth nothing. Trevon didn't attend. He didn't need to. He spent Tuesday morning in his classroom at Westside Community College teaching a lesson on the importance of ethical leadership and corporate governance. He felt a quiet, somber sense of justice. It was never about the money. It was about the principle. His grandfather's legacy was safe. 6 months later, the glass towers of Buckhead felt like a distant memory. Trevon was in his office at the community college. It was the same small, cramped space, cluttered with books and stacks of student papers, but something was different. Sunlight, warm and golden, streamed through the single window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The room didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a command center. On his desk, spread out over a dozen manila folders, were the blueprints for the future. After the Innovire deal collapsed, Trevon and Mr. Harris had spent weeks deliberating on the best way to reallocate the foundation's capital. Trevon knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wasn't interested in playing the high-stakes venture capital game anymore. He wanted to bring the investment back to the ground level. He had redirected the entire $10 million plus another $30 million from the foundation's general fund to create a new, unprecedented program at Westside Community College, the Lumina Foundation Center for Community Entrepreneurship. The $40 million fund was now dedicated to providing seed grants, mentorship, and incubator space for students and local residents right there on the west side of Atlanta. They wouldn't be building unicorns. They would be building bakeries, barbershops, daycare centers, and local software companies. They would be building a community. There was a soft knock on his door. "Professor Williams?" A young woman stood in the doorway. She was one of his brightest students, a young black woman named Imani, who reminded him of a younger, more hopeful Alia. She had luminous, dark skin, and her hair was in a cloud of beautiful, natural coils. She clutched a folder to her chest. "Come in, Imani. How's the business plan coming?" he asked, a warm smile on his face. "It's done," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and nerves. "I wanted to show you." She opened her folder on his desk. It was a plan for a mobile library and tutoring service for kids in her neighborhood. It was brilliant, well-researched, and full of heart. Tucked inside was a drawing she had made, a colorful sketch in crayon of a brightly painted van with kids sitting on blankets around it, reading books. In the corner, she had drawn a picture of her family, her mother, her little brother, and herself. She had used a deep brown crayon for their skin. She pointed to the drawing of herself. "That's me," she said, "the CEO." Trevon felt a warmth spread through his chest that no $40 million funding announcement could ever match. This was real wealth. This was the return on investment his grandfather had truly envisioned. It wasn't about building a single towering skyscraper that blocked out the sun for everyone else. It was about tending a garden, helping 100 different flowers bloom. He looked at Imani, at the fierce hope in her eyes. "Imani," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I think the Lumina Foundation would be very interested in being your first investor." True freedom, he now understood, wasn't about being free of people. It was about being free to help people. It wasn't found in the cold, empty space of a penthouse lounge, but in the crowded, vibrant ecosystem of a community. It turns out, the most valuable empires are not the ones we build for ourselves, but the foundations we lay so that others can build for themselves. What kind of foundation are you building in your own life? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about finding strength in the face of betrayal.
Welcome to the Story Channel. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few notes. The content in this video uses AI-generated images and voice narration, combined with the channel's creative editing. Everything is intended solely for entertainment purposes and does not depict or reflect any real events or real people. Hope you enjoy the story and have a great time watching.